welcome. My name is Gianpaolo Versace. I think most of you know me by now. I've been in this industry for a while. I've also been doing these webinars now for almost a year now, I think, maybe a year. So really appreciate everybody joining us for our webinar today, the first one of our new season. So we are planning quite a few more. They're all in the works. Today, our topic is Power Up and Press Play with Esports Spaces. This is a CEU accredited webinar. As usual, we'll be taking about 45 minutes for the presentation. And then afterwards, we'll have a few minutes, like about 10 minutes for any questions or comments. You can send those to us in the chat. So please feel free to share your thoughts or your questions while Christina is presenting, but also, of course, towards the end, if you'd like to speak up, we welcome that too. If you've registered for this webinar with your IDCEC number, we will make sure that we process that and that you will get your credit for today's CEU. We are recording this session and we'll make it available on our website. Usually we do that within 72 hours, but I think that we need a little bit longer today to get that done, but he will get it on as soon as possible. And it will be available in caseoffice.ca/events. Also would like to ask you to register for our next webinar. We'll be on October 20th. And the topic will be resistance to resilience. Make the shift. It's a challenge, obviously. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Christina Counts. She has been a speaker before, and we really enjoyed having her. She's a great speaker. And when she was telling me about the topic, today's topic, that was in the works as a new presentation, she was pretty much the first person I thought of to kick off the season. And so she graciously accepted our invitation. Dr. Christina Counts, she's VP of Education from MiEN, and is a proven leader with a successful background in transforming learning spaces to modern, engaging learning environments. In her position, Christina leads a team of professionals that support schools to make the transition to flexible, collaborative, and student-centered learning spaces. She envisions a learning space which educators are empowered to transform education through design, technology, and innovative instructional pedagogy to create learners that are ready for any future. I hope I said that well. Christina, it is your show, so take it away. I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, I'm actually going to go off camera too and pull up and share my screen with the slide deck in it. So let me get the presentation pulled up for you. So you should all be able to see my screen now.
Got it.
Got it. Perfect. All right, let's get rolling with esports. So a little bit about myself. I always like to know who the presenter is that's presenting, and that's also the teacher in me. So I'll share a few things. I am the VP of Education at MiEN Environments. I've been with MiEN now for 3 years, and it's really been a long journey with MiEN. When I was with a school district, I purchased MiEN as a buyer. I was a dealer and sold MiEN, and now I work with MiEN, really developing their research, their thought leadership, and looking at the whole integration of curriculum, technology, and innovation that's happening in the field of education. I have 17 years in K-12, so I taught first, third, fifth, and then went into high school for a few years. And then administration, then to their district office where I was the director of innovation and curriculum. And that's really where that passion came from for the physical learning spaces and how those connected with technology and curriculum. I am an ALEP, an accredited learning environment planner. And then the teacher in me, like I said, is that connection before content. So I am a Netflix junkie, and I really should update that to say I'm a streamer. Now we have Hulu, we have Disney Plus. Because of COVID and all the travel we do, I've really invested in a lot of these streaming platforms. So if you're looking for a recommendation, I've probably got one for you. We stream a lot of shows here in the Counts household. I'm addicted to Diet Coke, and running is my jam. I do a lot of training. I do one ultra trail marathon every year. So that takes a lot of training and running to get prepped for. But most importantly, I am the mom to Kate and Olin. My daughter is 13 and my son is 9. And I've shared this photo before because it reminds me of how different their personalities are. My daughter is a teacher's pet. She wants to be the pleaser. She's going to follow every direction. She's an auditory learner and visual learner. My son is very active. He is a hands-on learner. He wants to work in groups. He wants to explore. So they have very different learning styles. But one thing about that is with gaming, they both love it. Even though they have different learning styles, they're very different personalities, they both are very into Fortnite and Minecraft. They have, on our third story is their playroom. They both have their own gaming chairs, their own consoles and TV. So I think that's one thing about esports that's really driving it in popularity is it's very inclusive for all different populations. And we'll see a little bit more of that throughout the presentation, but they really always remind me of the why of the work that we do. And it's for the academic outcomes and for our little people, and even in higher education, our learners that are using these spaces. So again, this is certified with AIA and IDCEC. There's 4 objectives that we're going to cover. First, we're really going to look and define what are esports and see what that definition is. We're going to look at some of the physical environment and characteristics, those design drivers that really make a productive space for performance that's happening within the games. And then we're going to look at some example spaces, some renders and some install shots from some projects that have happened and kind of look at their lessons learned and what those zones are within the space. So what is esports? Esports spaces, they're making a big push into higher education, K-12, and really just into communities. They have been compared to whenever we had internet cafes pop up when we didn't have Wi-Fi easily accessible in our homes or devices. There was an internet cafe in every strip mall, in every corner. And that is the prediction for esports. And we are starting to see that happen, esports spaces where you can go and pay for your time to play. There's a huge one in New York called the Sandbox right now, and participants and users are lined up around the block to get into that space and be able to participate in the gaming. Esports is defined as an organized, team-based, multiplayer online video gaming. Those competitions can happen among teams in front of arenas. They can happen streamed on the internet or broadcasted on TV. One of the research studies that we read found in 2018 that 90% of teens play video games. And among that of adolescent boys, the percentage is 97%. One thing as educators, when especially we get to middle school and high school, is always keeping the boys engaged in school. So by leaning in to their interest areas, if that were gaming, that is one way to keep them engaged and interested in school. Contrary to the common perception, I think when we first thought of gaming, we automatically go think of that person unemployed in their parents' basement, right, playing video games. That's not the reality anymore. It's a booming industry globally. It's very investable. It's growing exponentially. There is an estimate that there's over 400 million fans right now that are actually selling out arenas around the world and subscribing to online channels where they are watching the gaming and participating in it. The eCampus News found that 21% of schools already have an esports program, and over 70% of K-12 schools are now considering introducing a curriculum that has some shape or form of gaming included in it. So historically, that gaming culture could be very isolating for students. So creating an esports curriculum at school and one within the community centers that can help reach students who feel like they've never really been connected with or can create that community of like-minded students. So how is esports written? When I first started about a year ago, deepening and diving into this research, I will admit I wrote it many different ways. Sometimes I capitalized the E, I hyphenated it sometimes. I even saw it written multiple ways, but it has been identified by the AP Style Guide that it is written esports with no capital or hyphen. It's only capitalized if it becomes a proper noun. It's a lot like email if you think about electronic mail, electronic sports. So we write it exactly like email and esports with no hyphen or caps. When we were at ISTE, it was interesting. There was a huge banner in one of the esports booths that was set up by one of the curriculum companies. And the banner said, the esports community actually cringes if you don't write it correctly. And I can attest to that because one of the blogs that we posted on social media, we quickly got pinged that we had written esports incorrectly. So when you're out there and presenting esports and maybe working on a project for it, just be sure no hyphen and only capitalize when it's a proper noun. So the next question that we get a lot is, are gamers actually athletes? And the answer is yes. The US government recognizes gamers, and that's internationally too, so that when players are competing in other countries, they get visas, athletic visas when they're competing, just like they would if they were coming for a soccer or a football or a hockey game. They are treated the same exact way as those sports. One of the research studies done really looked at how it impacts our physical well-being. And so one of the things that they noted was that in 1 minute, esports athletes can achieve 400 movements on the keyboard. I think back to my typing class days and think, oh my gosh, that is a ton. They are so fast on the keyboards. There also are various parts of the brain being used simultaneously. With that hand-eye coordination, it goes far beyond that of table tennis, where the hands are working asymmetrically in a lot of these games. But more scientifically, they measured the amount of cortisol that was produced, and it leveled at the same amount as a race car driver. And on their heart monitors, their heartbeat could be in pulse between 160 and 180. So when I'm riding the Peloton or working out, I am killing myself to get to 160. So apparently I'm doing something wrong. I need to go to the third story and do some gaming with my kids on their devices. But the research really has supported that esports can be just as demanding as some traditional sports. We often measure sports too as if they're athletes, if that's skillful, if there's strategy involved, if there's some teamwork and competition. Can it become a professional career where they're having success, maybe celebrity status? Can they turn that into a business? All of those are ways that we kind of define that. And esports really addresses every one of those components. One of our partners, when we were digging into this research in the last year, we visited a lot of higher education esports clubs, those in K-12, and even internationally. And one of our partners is the Sorby Esports Center that is in Denmark. Martin Fritzen does a lot of our blog posts, but really developed the largest esports center that they have there. And they actually, in their schools, make it a physical education component too. So they take the strategy that they would apply in the video game and bring that strategy outside and part of their physical education requirements. I know if my son got to have this at class and do Nerf guns and be outside playing the strategy, he would be hook, line, and totally into it to do it. And I think that that is attractive to a lot of the boys and participants within esports. So will esports be at the Olympic Games? The short answer is maybe, probably yes. The Olympic organizers have decided that they are going to welcome esports at the 2024 Olympic Games as a demonstration sport. So demonstration sports don't have medals. They're usually something that is really trending in the host nation or trending globally. But they are the gateway to becoming an Olympic sport. So badminton was a demonstration sport before it became a medaling sport. Same for some of the water dancing. Snowboarding was one of those. It was a demonstration first, and now it's a medaling sport. So we might just see esports become an Olympic game. So really digging in, what are the benefits of having esports in schools? That's what we're always after. How do we drive those academic and social emotional outcomes in this space? That's why we're there. So looking at that research of the why would we really want to make this investment in implementing an esports program? I think the first one that's most notable is the amount of collaboration and teamwork skills that happen. Research shows that 80% of esports teams are comprised of students who have never before participated in an extracurricular activity. I think about my time when I was working in high school about, students found that they were football. They found that they did well in CAD or kind of found their niche. Maybe it was band and music. But there always was a group of students maybe that didn't fit into one of those categories. And esports would have been an excellent outlet for them to join. Much like participation in an athletic team, esports players, they learn how to work together. They're learning how to communicate and collaborate with each other on the team. Similar to any sports team, students still have to understand their team member skills and learn how to work together and complement their abilities during those competitions. A competitive esports team helps students take their gaming to the next level. They're really learning leadership, sportsmanship, and communication as they play. They spend a lot of time analyzing game statistics and really strategizing before that next competition. Increasing academic and social engagement. Again, that's what we're always after. So according to the High School Esports League, there's been a 1.7 increase in GPA for those students who started participating, which isn't surprising. Just like other sports, you have to keep your grades up to be able to participate in the esports competitions. So if you're not making the academic requirements, then you no longer are on the esports team. They have found an improvement in school attendance, a 56% increase in engagement in academics, and then a large increase in opportunity for scholarships into national colleges. Exploration of STEM concepts and career pathways. That NASEF is one of the largest providers right now of esports curriculum, and their focus really is looking at the career and STEM pathways that can come out of an esports program. I heard a stat in a conversation recently where they were comparing it a lot to NFL football. Only 1% of NFL are actually the players on the field. The others are all in hospitality, marketing, management, coaching, different roles that it takes to really pull off the whole NFL. Esports is the same way. For a 5 versus 5 tournament, there are easily 50 different types of careers that help accomplish that tournament. It could be anywhere from the content creators that are making it, strategists doing the market research, a performance coach, the financial side of it, event planning, venue coordination. There's a whole lot of careers that stem from this. And I think that's a large connection too with higher ed and the programs that they're offering in the colleges and universities that align with competitive gaming. Improved brain function and capabilities. There are several benefits of video gaming on the brain, and evidence has been found that scientifically. One of these studies, the participants, they had 3 groups, one playing Super Mario 3D, one playing Angry Birds, and the last group did not play any of the games. This was for 2 weeks. For those that played the 3D video games for 2 weeks, they had a 12% increase in their memory recall and memory performance. So just over a 2-week span, they were able to already improve that. Additionally, they did a study over a year long with those same games, and the participants who were playing the 3D games drastically increased their gray matter, which that's the area of the brain that does planning, decision-making. It's also our area of personality, which this research has really pushed a lot of other outcomes too. There is a large group right now working with Alzheimer's and in nursing homes, introducing video games for this exact reason, that it has shown such an ability to have an impact on the brain plasticity that they are integrating those with our elderly also. And then the last benefit, tournaments offer peer connections, but scholarship opportunities. A recent article that we read had it at 170 US colleges having varsity esports programs, 16 million per year. I recently read an updated version of this that said 200 colleges and up to 30 million per year in scholarships right now. My son, of course, being a gamer, has heard me deliver this presentation when they've been out for COVID, or even right now as he's home because of the hurricane. And they made their pitch of why they should get extra screen time. They both have limited time each day on screens. I'm trying to make well-rounded children. So they are advocating that now that they know there are scholarships for gaming, they want more screen time. This is one example of an arena of one of the universities that we went to for those lessons learned, things that they had done well, things that they might do differently, and really kind of digging into that research. This is HU. It's a 2,400 square foot facility with 24 gaming rigs. They have areas for coaching, player collaboration, interactions, and skill development. From that research within these K-12, higher ed, and abroad is where we really came up with the gaming lab setup of looking at what were the different zones, what were the areas that they had to have to really make the area where they could have extended gameplay, stress reduction, increased productivity and performance. And by establishing these design drivers that we call them, we're hoping to make a more seamless and successful project for the esports spaces. So breaking that into zones, there are 5 zones that the MiEN research identified: a battle station zone, the arenas, a strategizing zone, shoutcasting zone, and an area to relax and recharge. So let's look at what some of that might look like. One of the biggest questions we get is, where do we put this esports program? If we're in an existing school, it's not new construction, where can we house it? Oftentimes we're putting them in the media center. So this was a project from Bangor High School where on the daily, this is what their setup is for their media center when it's functioning as a media center. It will shape shift to become their esports layout when they are hosting their esports community or competitions or having their esports club into the media center. So throughout this presentation and for each of the zones, I'll kind of show you how they incorporated that zone into their media center layout so that it could function as both their media center and their esports space. Here is the main area that it takes place in, and we'll look at that throughout each zone. So Battle Station Zone is the first one. It holds the desktop, the computer setups. It could include a tower, monitor, their mouse, keyboard, any audio playback and recording devices if applicable, and then all of their wire management. The Battle Station Zone is also called their gaming rigs. I chose that graphic on purpose because it reminds me of me playing Pac-Man in Pizza Huts on Friday night. That's where we had our games before Atari came out. So if you got any other Pac-Man lovers out there, you can see it pop up several times throughout this presentation. So what are the design drivers to build out those gaming rigs in the battle stations? Adjustable and fixed tables. That was one of the lessons learned. One of the esports spaces we went to had a lot of adjustable tables, but when they are in deep competition, they want no movement. They want it very sturdy and fixed. So they requested to have adjustable when they're practicing and hanging out so that they could stand and have choice in movement, and then very fixed when they were in competition. Ideally, a larger table surface, 48 inches to 60 for the table surface. That's really a wish list. We noticed that in most of them, they don't have that space to be able to also have enough gaming rigs for the club. But a lot of the games require them to stretch their arms out. So if you think of the wingspan, it needs to have a little bit more room so that they're not hitting the people beside them during the gameplay. And then, of course, wire management. Unshielded. This was a surprise to me. I thought that you would want to be so focused into the game that you kind of would like your cubicle and to not have any distractions around. But it is the exact opposite. It is a very common practice for everybody to be spectating and cheering you on over the shoulder, for your friends to come sit down beside you and cheer you on. It's really meant to be social and collaborative. So no shields around the gaming rigs. And then, of course, they're sitting sometimes for long periods of time, and also different age groups and sizes coming through. So how can we incorporate the correct ergonomic seating and choices in seating to accommodate the diversity within the space? So again, back to that media center, what does it look like? If you see highlighted in the red on the left over here, these are their gaming rigs. This is also where they use their CAD programming, research within the library. So they're really multitasking those computer setups. And then if you take a closer look, this one has standalone wire management so that it easily can move anywhere throughout the room for their cable management. There is one shield that is put in between the stations, kind of, it's low, so you can still see over it. That was intentionally done for acoustics. It does sometimes get loud. They're all talking in their headsets or talking to each other and cheering along. So trying to also think about how are we managing the acoustics in this very active space. Another example. And here, this is from our Sorby Esports Center of that over the shoulder, cheering along, watching as they're gaming. So having that little bit of extra space around to accommodate that. This is our booth that would have been at Ed Spaces 2 years ago. They went virtual because of COVID with our partner STS. And if you see the gaming stations on the left over there, there's a lot of space in between those towers, in between the stations. At first, when our designers presented this, I was like, whoa, wait, we could fit another chair, another gaming device there. But I was reminded that that is intentional for that spectating, for a student to grab their laptop and come sit beside them and practice some things. So the extra space, if you have it, is well received and really a wish list item. Shoutcasting zone. Shoutcasting is referring to that running commentary of esports matches. It's intended to entertain and inform the viewer. It's a crucial part of what makes esports so engaging. So it's really their broadcasting station. And when we think of like careers and jobs, there are some students that is all they're interested in. They want to be the shoutcaster. They want to be analyzing and announcing the plays and bringing the hype to the esports arena. So that is a whole nother zone and another skill set and part of the esports area. The shoutcasting zone also often has video production. They like multiple monitors. Some of these design drivers include the multiple monitoring. They're watching different games happening at a time. So whether that's multiple monitors on their table surface, or sometimes we've seen the TVs mounted in front of their shoutcasting station. They need additional space compared to the gaming rigs because they do have mixers, recording devices, stream decks. They have a lot more equipment than the gaming rigs do. So they need a little bit more space. This is an area, and really the whole esports room, they like a ton of color and a ton of branding. When we were at Michigan, their esports space, they had several logos on the wall. Their chair had their esports team embroidered in 4 different places on the chair. And I had commented on, is branding and your coloring, scheme a huge part of esports gaming? And they were adamant that you had to have all of that they really like it to reflect the virtual games that they're playing in. So how can they make their space look like that virtual land? I kind of made the comment of like, you got a lot of branding in here. And they were like, yes, we're going to even add 3 more to this wall, 1 on the table surface. So I took away that you cannot have enough of the color and branding. And then mobile. Shoutcasters sometimes like to be in the middle of the action, but there also are times when they need a little bit more soundproofing and want to step away from it. So if you have the capabilities to make that table mobile so that they can move in and out of the action happening. Again, Thinking of acoustics on the wall here, there's a lot of acoustic panels added. There's acoustic dividers here. These are low shields again, so they still can kind of interact with each other, but can absorb a little bit of that sound between the various shoutcasting stations. If you're looking at the booth from Ed Spaces, in the center here is the shoutcasting area. So very mobile for this one. They can be part of the action. We can move it out of the way if need be. And then looking at the zone for arena, a place for observation for spectators to comfortably watch without distracting the gamers. Spectating is huge. My kids will watch YouTubers, they'll watch a Twitch channel for hours of other people playing games. And I really could not understand that at the time. But I think back to when we got Zelda, we had to wait on that magazine to come out with all of the tips and tricks of where the hidden things were within the game. Our kids don't have to wait. They have it live streaming and at their hand ready on any internet, YouTube, any of the channels that are dedicated to gaming. So watching is equally as engaging, and some participants are just watchers of the esports games. So it could be a really large arena. They also could be some mini arenas set up. Design drivers for this: large monitors for the spectators to be able to watch, seating for the spectators, thinking about tiered seating, and that ability to shape shift. So you're not always going to have a competition or live game happening. So can we use that furniture to also be the area for strategizing or for a different function throughout? So really making sure that the arena is also very flexible to accommodate different functions happening within the space. So here, center stage, you can see the really large monitor, those flex steps in front of it to be able to watch and lounge around together. But there's also this smaller arena here that could work for analyzing games, small group watching and spectating. And again, there's some acoustical value there with that soft seating in the high back. This is a great example of a project. We did this media center in Michigan a couple years before they actually started their esports program. But because the media center was designed to be very modern and future ready, it had really flexible furniture. It had some of these media sharing walls already for students to participate presentation skills and practice their collaboration, that it also really functioned well once they started an esports program. So it's great to see how a media center or a space can easily shapeshift with just a few design considerations up front. So here again, here they are around watching and cheering on as their players are competing. This is a great example of the tiered seating that could also work for strategizing, which is the zone we're going to share next. But there's spots for students to sit down and watch, but these could also be collaboration or areas where they can just hang out and communicate with each other. So strategizing. I have no idea why, but when I first started learning about esports, I just didn't put a coach with esports or a teacher, but there is a dedicated esports coach. There are actually trainings now for esports coaches to attend. And often they even have an assistant coach in some of our higher ed that are really helping train the kids and lead the program. So creating those face-to-face zones adjacent to the gaming areas and the battle stations really helps encourage those deeper connections. And it offers a place where peers can analyze previous games. They can look at game statistics, start to look at and plan out their future gaming strategies. I always think of this area as kind of like a mini teaching area within the game space. So some of those design drivers that it would need: whiteboard surfaces or writable surfaces. It could be glass walls that they could write on. The ability to nest and stack, kind of for that option to create an arena or to be able to also have it as a strategizing area. Mobile displays, being able to analyze those games in a small group or be able to watch the plays while you're strategizing, and then making sure it's very flexible seating. So thinking back to Bangor, our high school that put it in their media center, these red dots are where they put their tables here for their strategizing. And they used it flip top tables, collaboration tables throughout, and some cafe tables. And then this is a great example of having that whiteboard, the table to pull around, kind of that community Genius Bar feel with the mobile monitor so that they can watch those game plays and statistics and really plan out their competition. And the next zone is the relax and recharge. An often forgotten aspect of designing an esports space is to provide an area for students to take breaks. Esports is very sedentary sometimes. It's important to consider those health implications of sitting for 3 to 4 hours. How can we also get them up where they can stand up, move around, stretch between games, kind of that lounging spot to give their eyes a break from the screens, especially after an intense match. They love to debrief afterwards and get together and talk about the game that was happening. So thinking about those spots where a player can just lounge and socialize and build that camaraderie between games or training sessions. Some design drivers for that: soft seating, a kitchenette concession stand. That was one wish list that we heard over and over again, that they didn't plan for that, especially in our higher ed. They're often sponsored by food and beverage, Red Bull, water companies. And so one of the places we went to, they had little mini Red Bull coolers and Monster coolers all around. And there just was no great space for trash collection or for those drinks to be housed and served. So that was a wish list on a lot of the spaces that we visited. The ability to charge their own devices when they're stepping away from the gaming rigs. And then this is a great spot for active furniture: wobble stools, stools that swivel. This tiered seating in our high school that placed it in the media center, this is what they are using as their kind of relax recharge area where they can go sit down and hang out together. There also is a soft seating areas within for that same ability to just get comfy. So on the far right, we see a little bit of soft seating integrated here to be able to do that. There's ottomans that could pick up in this space and go anywhere throughout to take a seat, or those flex steps to just be able to lounge and chill out a little bit. Thinking about the snacks and food in every one of these images, if you look closely and play I Spy, there is some sort of drink or snack in this esports arena, and they did not have a spot for it either. So far left is where they're kind of selling their concessions. This little fella has his Pringles can right beside his device. This has a Pepsi can, which put my OCD in overdrive, I'll be honest, having those liquids by those expensive gaming rigs. But that's part of the socialization and the camaraderie that they want in the culture they want to build in the esports programming. There's a bunch of, looks like ginger ale cans on the right corner there. So it's interesting, as I went through all our photos from our tours, all of them had snacks and drinks in them. So thinking about starting with what you already have, like the school with the media center, and adding their esports into the media center, especially if it's an up and coming esports program where you don't have a lot of interest in it yet and it's just growing. Start with what you already have. Maybe it's a computer lab, a corner in the media center, an extra science lab that's not being utilized throughout the day. This was one that we did in North Carolina that utilizes this space for their esports club, but it's also their innovation, their STEM lab. So it had to have a lot of different functionality. So on that left wall, those are what we made into our mini arenas for spectators to watch, for others to watch the gaming that was happening. We put the tables throughout so that they could stand or sit together and collaborate with their coach or their peers. At the very front of the room is the shoutcasting station for them to broadcast, but also works as a teacher station for those other classes, and the teacher desk if STEM is in there or a science class happening. And so the goal of this school was build interest in their esports program. And then once that's really up and running, this space will be outfitted a little bit more for a full esports gaming space. And then, like the project in Midland in Michigan, if you are knowing what these design drivers are, and the schools don't currently have an esports program, but if we give them the right flexible furniture, if we give them some of these media sharing walls where they can spectate and go back and analyze, then really we're helping them be prepared if they add an esports space in the future. Some additional design considerations to think about too that we didn't mention in some of the samples so far. We talked about reflecting the virtual lands and get creative with that school branding, adding in acoustical baffles where you can. One of the other major pain points we heard over and over again is that they don't have a lot of spaces that can accommodate the competitions. They really want to have the competitions face-to-face, part of building that social, the interaction. It's also been shown that there are 70% more likely to show up and come to the event if it's face-to-face versus when they're hosting it online. But there are not a lot of spaces within school districts, within the community that can house and have enough gaming rigs and be able to support those competitions. So that's been an area where a lot of people are looking at how can we create these hosting spaces. We have a district in Texas right now that is actually building an entire suite for gaming rigs, and they're going to use that to host all of the competitions throughout Texas. They're also using it as an income driver because they're charging to come in and use this space and charging for participants to come through the door. So that's one of the ways they're solving their pain point. We're working with a university who is partnered with their 2 high schools in a very small rural town, and they have purchased one of the abandoned buildings in their downtown area and are converting the old theater into a whole esports gaming space that the community can use. That's a joint program with their high schools and their college to start to streamline that and really offer that space for participants to go. Storage. So in several of the images that you probably saw a little bit of cabinetry that we added in, mobile storage. When I went to tour one of the esports labs, there were keyboards, headsets, different types of mouse all around the floor and the perimeter. And again, I was kind of like, what is going on with all the equipment? The gamers like to use their own headsets, their own keyboards, and their own mouse because they know what their speed settings are. They're comfortable on their keyboards. And that fraction of a second using one they're not as familiar with could cause them to lose the game. So those were the school provided ones or ones that other people were not using, just kind of ditched around the room. So they had 0 storage in their space. So thinking about incorporating storage for that extra equipment that is inevitably going to show up in the space. And then a faculty office. I mentioned that I ignorantly didn't think off the bat when I first was learning about esports about there being a coach. And I guess I associated with my kids upstairs gaming, there's no coach. They just kind of figured it out, but they all kind of missed having an office or even a dedicated desk area or mobile ped that was in their space to kind of keep their materials and the things that they would need in their coaching. One of the other things that's not on here, but that we have started to also hear a lot about is the types of lighting that's in the space. We have always been encouraging for more windows, more natural light. The research really supports natural light, but the gamers don't want any natural light when they're gaming. They do like it when they're, having their class lecture or looking at statistics, but with all the monitors, they really like blackout curtains to be added, and they like the ability for dimmer switches to be able to dim the lighting in the space so that they can control that for the various functions happening within the gaming. So back to that high school with that big red box over there, it's open. There was no furniture in there, and that was intentional. That is where their VR is going to take place. So they left that wide open so that the students could safely use their headsets throughout that space. The picture that you see is from a project in Florida, and that is their VR space. They quickly learned that they also needed storage for all the backpacks from the kids when they were changing classes and coming in. So they used their old lockers for now to store the book bags and extra things in the space. But for VR, you just need an open space that doesn't have any clutter on the floor so that they don't have any safety hazards. So in thinking about our esports and esports research and design drivers, we share a lot of this. It's a trend that is changing on the daily and growing a lot. And as we learn more and dig in a little more in the research and have additional installs and projects, we are sharing those on our social media platforms. We are most active with the research on LinkedIn. So if you're not following MiEN Environments on LinkedIn, I would suggest you hop over there and give it a follow. And then if you're looking for eye candy for inspiration on the spaces, we post most of those install images on our Instagram. So that would be a good place to go follow. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and hop back on camera and open it up to any questions, thoughts, ahas.
Well, thank you so much, Christina. I think that was, well, at least for me, an eye-opener. I know a little bit about these things. And of course, my son became obsessed with some gaming too. Just curious what you're telling us today is very much education focused, and I assume esports is mostly driven by colleges, universities, and maybe high schools. But do you see these types of spaces popping up, outside of education?
Yeah, a lot. I mentioned that one in New York called the Sandbox that people are lining up for, and there are versions of that popping up all over the place. I went to one in North Carolina that was a community center, and they were really digging into esports and inviting students in because that's their main goal, is to draw in the teenagers, draw in their community into it. And they had been very stagnant. They weren't getting the usage of the community center. So they did install an esports space, and they say it is booked from after school on. They've also incorporated now offering clinics on podcasting, how to green screen. One of their students that went through there is 9 and has a Twitch channel. It's Create with an 8 in it for the spelling. And he is already a millionaire off his Twitch channel, where he learned how to lead the podcasting and do the channel all at this community center clinics. So I think you'll see a lot of those popping up throughout. And, I think everybody's leaning in. All kids like gaming. There are a lot of adults that like gaming. There are a few things on my apps that I have gotten into gaming on now. So I think that it's so inclusive that it's going to continue to just grow in popularity.
Okay. You kind of touched a little bit on it too, that you don't have to have a dedicated esports arena or space if you're just starting out. What kind of a hybrid forms are you seeing? Are you seeing anything with like maybe maker spaces and esports, or what are you seeing out there?
Yep, we see a lot of maker spaces turning into the esports spot because they're already outfitted with really flexible furniture and mobile whiteboards and a lot of those things that would support those zones that we kind of identified. The one differentiator that does take a little bit of effort, right, is the technology that they're on. Those gaming rigs do require a little bit higher processing power and whatnot in their devices. Often our high schools are using their CAD labs because they already have the proper technology in there and turning their CAD lab also into their esports space. That's also where we see some of the funding coming from for these. There's a lot more funding out for STEM, for their CAD classes in high school or even in college. So they're using that funding to support that program, but also support their esports spaces at the same time.
So for all those cables and wires and all that technology, are you seeing that there is a need for special provisions for that, ease of access to all that technology in case something needs to be replaced or upgraded?
Yeah, it's interesting because we have tried to prevent the teacher from being tethered. We've gone to Chromebooks and, where they can take Wi-Fi anywhere, anytime, any place learning. But for gaming, they definitely like to be hardwired in because of how fast they can stream and there's no interruptions, maybe when they're all gaming. So that has been the preference. A lot of the architects that we're working with on new builds are already starting to wire in. If they are to add an esports space in the school or in the facility later on, they'll have that already in their facility. So that's kind of that forward thinking. And when we're working on new schools now, even though they're not thinking of an esports space, we ask the question like, but do you think you maybe might do one in 5-10 years? If you think so, now's the time to network and really bring that cabling and the technology in to support it when you decide to launch it.
Yeah. I haven't seen any questions yet from the audience on the chat, but if anyone does have a question, please feel free to speak up, or you can still type. Because I had one more that I wanted to ask you, and that's really the Canadian situation, right? So I've heard a few times some clients starting to ask about these types of spaces. Haven't seen it widespread yet, but I might be missing something. So what's kind of maybe Eliza knows that too because she covers the Canadian market. But what are we seeing in Canada?
Eliza, I think you just worked on a project, right, with a school that is doing an esports space?
Yes, we've just started doing one, or we just finished one up, I should say, here in Alberta. And to what Christina was saying, they were really using the media center, and they essentially took a portion of that, and they wanted to included those steps that we saw. They included a lot of those different components and zones. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. And I think, Gianpaolo, it is definitely growing. I think to have that full space is something, I'm still yet to see, but it's definitely starting to be included in those learning commons, media centers, kind of the larger spaces that are becoming, that multi-purpose space.
Yeah, and Christina, you mentioned Denmark, right? So it is really starting to be a global phenomenon as well. It's not just North America.
Yeah, Denmark is so far ahead of us. Even our biggest esports programs that have been around the longest, Denmark has far surpassed them, but they've been doing it a lot longer than any of these programs have. I think for us too, there's still a lot of curriculum development. That being a teacher, at first I was like, no way am I giving up my class time for gaming. I'm required for them to know certain standards and academic outcomes. But the curriculum writers have done such a great job of actually putting math standards in there. So they're doing math with the gaming. One example over COVID where the kids were building the COVID shape. They had to build a hospital, and they had to come up with the financial plan to support it, all through Minecraft. So they used Minecraft to develop that whole system. So now, having looked at some of the curriculum and seeing how they're really connecting those learning targets with the interest of the kids, that they're gaming, which they love to do, but they don't realize they're also doing so many learning targets at the same time. So I think now that the curriculum is really catching up to where they aren't just playing games all day, that there are some objectives, learning objectives within, I think it's even, expediting the popularity.
So in that case, I think and that might be my personal misconception too, but sometimes I think of gaming still as something that's just, point and shoot, right? But that's not really just all that gaming is. There's way more to it than just those types of games.
Right. And I think that's the focus of the esports programs in education is they're just using the gaming as a vehicle to teach. They're putting the learning objectives, and all the curriculum is still as complex as it was if you were direct instructing from the front of the room. They're just using a tool now that students are really engaged and motivated by.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I haven't seen any questions come through, so maybe this is still a very fresh topic for everybody, but we do appreciate everybody joining us today. Christina, you just put your email address in the chat. So I assume that means people are free to reach out to you if they do have any follow-up questions. I know that MiEN is also really great at collaborating with the design community, with furniture dealers. If anyone has a project and wants to get some ideas or thought starters created, you'll be able to assist with that, right?
Yeah, we can assist you with that. Go ahead, Eliza. That's your wheelhouse.
I was just going to say, I will toss, I'm the account manager for MiEN in Canada, so I will toss in my email as well if there's any specific follow-up questions, you know, and if there's anything, you know, esports related, I can definitely pull in Christina and make sure that your questions are answered from the expert here. So but definitely feel free to reach out.
Perfect. And otherwise, you know, people can also always connect with us at Chase Office Interiors, and we'd be, you know, more than happy to make that connection. I see that it is now 12:57, so just a few minutes before the 1 o'clock. If there's no further questions, I would like to thank you know, Eliza, and especially, of course, Christina today for the presentation. We ask you to be filling out our survey that we'll be sending to you, and just provide your comments, and also if you have any ideas for future topics for our webinars, we always really appreciate it. So please let us know. And again, just a reminder of our upcoming webinar on Thursday, October 20th. And I'm going to remind you that was Resistance to Resilience, Make the Shift. And you can sign up on our website at chaseoffice.ca/events. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to give you everybody 2 minutes back of your workday, but we really appreciate it. This is a really interesting topic.